Welcome back to the Tectonic Takes podcast. We got a big week for the San Jose Earthquakes, Messi and the power of friendship. But we'll talk mostly about the friendship aspect of things. As you may recall, we had a conversation with another New England Revolution content creator, Greg, in the preseason about the exchanges of players and coach in the case of Bruce Arena coming from and Shalry Joseph too, from New England to San Jose and vice versa. Since then, a few more transactions have happened between the two clubs, and we're seeing similar storylines in terms of resurgences compared to what was a forgettable 2024 season. But with us today, we have Sam Minton from the Blazing Musket. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, happy to talk what are, very much, I guess, two different teams, but it seems like they have a whole lot alike. And it is going to be probably, it always that Messi match is always an interesting one, but I think this might be the most anticipated match of the season for New England Revolution fans.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be very anticipated for Quakes fans as well. Of course, there is a segment of Major League Soccer fans, and of course, as a byproduct, respective fans in all 30 teams' markets that are more invested in the league because Lionel Messi is in it. So there's that aspect of it too. And if you are looking for more coverage regarding the Inter Miami and all the happenings regarding that game and which hotel he's staying at, that sort of thing. There's plenty of Quakes content creators and MLS content creators that do that. Probably by the time this is uploaded, the Inter Miami game will have passed anyway. But it was cool to see Fabi, a friend of the podcast, come on our local ABC affiliate this morning to be interviewed about that game. Abram, did you have a chance to maybe see the clip that Fabi shared?
Yeah, of course. Fabi is very active on the internet, and I always say to everyone, Fabi is probably the hardest working person I know.
Mm-hmm.
He's working all the time. If you're hanging out with him, he's still working. Um, but yeah, really great friend of ours here, not just of the podcast, but personal friend as well. So happy to see his success in that, and it was really cool to see him on TV like that.
Yeah, I got to meet him at the All Star game. Great guy, like you said, always working. So, it's great to hear that he's getting a little bit of shine and, getting to, go in a local news affiliate. It's interesting, all of a sudden when Lionel Messi's come to town, everybody wants to talk to everybody.
Yeah, it definitely flipped the switch, not unlike back in the David Beckham era of Major League Soccer. A lot of people's antennas pop up whenever a player with that kind of reputation is upon us. And especially given that this is a West versus East matchup, we will probably only get this one time in San Jose. Granted, Messi might be doing whatever LeBron is doing to keep his longevity going. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the games that passed for each of our respective teams. Some very interesting outcomes, a goal fest involving New England and Orlando, and a much needed 2-0 win to even up the series with Colorado Rapids this season. We will alternate Sam and Abram answering some of the questions I prepared back and forth regarding some of the progress that our teams have made and how the seasons are going. And yeah, by the time this video is done, we will have a full picture of what's ahead for both these clubs ahead of Saturday's game in New England, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So we'll start with you, Sam. What was your initial reaction when you noticed that there was a lot of transactions happening between these two specific clubs?
Yeah, it was like something where, you saw like the first couple deals, or maybe like one or two deals go through, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. But then, once things started to really pick up, obviously with Bruce going there and just all the players going, it's as soon as there was any sense that a player might be on the way out, particularly someone like a Noel Buck wasn't getting any playing time, you're like, oh, well, I'm sure San Jose's on the line, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So it's quite interesting. I would probably say as of right now, San Jose, maybe it's just quantity. They seem to have gone the better of the deal in the sense that, a lot of players over there, have been doing well. Especially looking at a guy like DeJuan Jones. That's a great move for him. Happy to see that he's coming off a great performance. But when you look at the Rev side of things, Tanner Beason, kudos to him. I was definitely not high on him, but he's kind of become that third man in the 3-5-2 that has somehow got the Revolution back on track. So I think he's done a good job. Jackson Yueill, I talked with Favi. He gave me kind of the lowdown on him for an article I did, and wasn't exactly the highest of he's definitely has had some great times, but maybe last season wasn't exactly the best. He's been serviceable, but now Matt Polster and Alsan Yusuf are really the two kind of center mid duos there. So I think with all the talent and the quantity, but also some of the quality, so far it seems like San Jose has gotten the better of the deal, and I think also too getting Bruce Arena isn't that bad either.
Yeah, I think that we didn't know what to make of the initial wave of New Englanders when they arrived. This included Dave Romney, Ian Harkes, and Mark Anthony Kay in particular. The former two have become regular starters throughout the season, and Mark Anthony Kay has had this rare role of almost like a closer, a defensive mid that we feel comfortable subbing in maybe in the early second half or with 60, 65 minutes left to go. Abram, fair to say that this group has exceeded expectations so far?
Yeah, I mean, anyone listening to the show regularly, they heard me, give Mark Anthony Kay and Ian Harkes a hard time because in the preseason they didn't look like they wanted to be here. To be honest, and that's probably the harshest way I could put that. But no, as soon as the whistle blew for the regular season, they both, you know, completely changed in attitude, and I felt like they've been some of the strongest players on the roster, not just Ian Harkes, who I feel like is the unsung hero of the season so far. I think a lot of the success we've had is because of how hard he works and everything he provides to us, just by being there because he's everywhere. I know DeJuan Jones obviously isn't directly from the Revs, but he's big too. I think Noah Bucks is going to help us. I think that the new personnel has been huge, and I haven't even talked about like Chicho or Joseph. Like that's a whole other dimension that gives us just changed the whole identity of the club and what people should expect of us, I guess.
Yeah, and just to say, with whole Mark Anthony Kay, seeing him score Olympicos in practice, and overall putting in some quality performances for you guys, New England Revolution fans are quite stunned by this development. Mark Anthony Kay did not have the best go around in New England, so I think seeing him perform well. Ian Harkes is a guy who works really hard, and I wasn't necessarily too surprised to see him do well, but seeing. I'm quite shocked to see, Mark Anthony Kay, being kind of that super sub, defensive role. Seems like it's better for him than how he performed in New England.
Yeah. Abram, have you had a chance to see any clips of either Beason or Yueill's performances for New England yet?
I believe I saw like there was a clip circulating of he got an assist off a corner kick or something like that. Um, and I'm happy for him. I When I saw his face, I was like, that's not the shirt you should be wearing because I literally hadn't seen him since last season when he was playing for us. So I was surprised that you weren't like immediately down on Tanner Beason when you spoke about him briefly just now, because he was one of the guys where like we have to get rid of him fast, get him out. And something thought was funny was we spoke to Greg from the other Revs podcast, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I thought Mensa was good, so I don't know what the vision is bringing in Beason. Like, is Beason gonna be better?" I'm like, "No, your instincts are right. Beason's not good. You should be upset that you lost Mensa and brought in Beason. But no, I think that Beason did have a lot of positives. I don't know if it necessarily outweighed the negatives, but it is really weird. When I see the clips, just briefly on my Twitter or whatever, it's like that seems wrong. But I'm glad that they're playing because I don't think that they would be playing in this regime under Bruce Arena.
Yeah, especially like a guy like Tanner Beason, if it wasn't really for this formation switch, he'd probably just be more of a depth piece, and that was almost kind of the expectation. And I honestly had the same reaction that you had, thinking of guy in Tanner Beason coming over from a team that was leaking goals wouldn't be the prime suspect to add a center back from that squad. So, it's been quite a development to see him continue to perform well. He's kind of just putting in kind of real hardworking performances, kind of similar in a vein that you mentioned Ian Harsh. He's just really grinding, putting his body in front of balls, and I think it helps to have, two center backs with European experience, but, kudos to Beason for being able to etch out this role for himself. And Jackson Yueill, I think he had a good start. He's become sort of a set piece specialist, especially when he first started. For a long time, it was Carlos Heel trying to make everything work. But Jackson Yueill was a guy who kind of took some corner duties, but now he's more of a bench piece with, again, Alisson Yusuf and Matt Polster kind of taking the starting 11 spots.
Yeah, and after I did speak with Greg I listened to the Revolution Recap podcast a bit to learn more about their overall transactions between seasons, and just looking at the list now, it looks like at least a dozen players out and a similar amount in excluding super draft picks, which also are new signings. Of those players that have left, including some notable names such as Bekrek, Terevic, Boateng, and Vrioni, along with the Quakes exodus. So not just between these two clubs, but so much turnover in this season alone, even by MLS's standards. Was your head spinning?
Oh, it for sure was spinning. I think, talking with, fellow media members and, members of the Blazing Musket, it's almost like an expansion draft. You look at what San Diego did, and, it was technically, similar transactions. I think, like you said, when you look at in and out, it's around, 30 transactions. So it's essentially a whole new side, and, there's definitely been some home runs, like I mentioned, two center backs in Mamadou Fofana and Brian Ceballos. They've probably been, the better acquisitions. There's some others who have kind of, struggled to find form and maybe aren't necessarily, meant to be starters. So it's definitely was a whole lot to take in. And when you looked at how the team started, it very much looked like a new team that was completely different. But as the seasons progressed, as they've switched their style of play, they've been able to come into their own form. You have a guy like Ignatius Ganago scoring his first goal in, I believe, 686 days when he scored his first goal for the Revs. So it's absolutely kind of wild to see how, in the grand scheme of things, how quickly this team's turned things around and how they've been able to gel as a unit. So definitely head was spinning, and somehow it all is pretty much working out. Obviously there's still a long season to go, though.
Yep, and Abram, before it was Robert Taylor and being one of the key pieces alongside Lionel Messi, it was Leo Campagna, the Ecuador international. So if not for Martinez and Arango coming to us, I think Campagna coming to the Revolution would have been talked about even more so. What do you make of Campagna as a player in MLS?
Yeah, I mean, we've Devin and I have had numerous arguments. I'll just put it. So he doesn't like Campagna. He thinks that he's not good on the ground. I think Campagna is a very serviceable striker in this league. I think that he gets the job done. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with him. I think that he just shows what he was able to do. It wasn't just because Messi was there and whatever he's done at the Revs. I'm sure furthers that argument. I can't say that I'm Leo Campana stan and I'm looking at every single highlight he gets, but no, I think he's one of the in the top half of the strikers in this league probably, and Sammy might even say that he's even higher than that. I don't know.
No, it's a good point. I even forgot about the whole Leo Campana transaction, and that was, just looking at the financial aspect of it, just the amount of money they spent. It was a major one, and I think so far, when you kind of look, there's a lots of comparisons you can make, even though it is a completely different team from 24 to this current side. I think the fact that they have a guy like Leo Campana is one of those key points, because you had a Giacomo Vrioni, and it seemed like you could put him in the perfect scenario and he would somehow find a way not to score or even get a shot on target. When you have Leo Campana, he's being able to get into the right spots and he's being able to finish. I think between Carlos Heel and Leo Campana, they're pretty much the bulk of your goal scoring, and I think he's definitely good in the air, but I think he definitely also is talented and just his hold up play and kind of being able to be more of an overall number nine. Giacomo Vrioni was kind of more of a get in behind the back line, use maybe some of that speed and skill, even though he is a big guy. But Campana seems to be a bit more of the whole package. Obviously, if it's a whole package, he would probably be in Europe and absolutely dominating. But especially for like MLS standards, I think he's a quality striker, and now he's kind of being able to show what he's capable of now that he's not having to sit on the bench for Messi and friends, and he doesn't get that built-in excuse of, oh, you're playing with Lionel Messi, of course you're going to be good, especially for a Revolution squad that's kind of struggled to score. He's really showing just how valuable he can be.
And one more trivia question for Abram. Do you remember the nickname for New England Revolution's original logo?
I know that it was a flag, the Stars and Stripes, Stars Spangled Banner. I don't know.
I'm looking for a arts and crafts brand.
God,
Think,
It's not an arts and
not
crafts band. It's
Michaels?
just the arts and crafts utensil.
Crayola. The Crayola.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Okay. I'm gonna have to give some. So I don't. Did anyone call it the Crayola flag? I heard the crayon flag.
Maybe that was my own headcanon that put specifically Crayola into the crayon
It
flag.
would be
But I
more
loved it.
hilarious if it was Crayola. I would have loved that. I think even more possibly.
Yeah, but it's high quality Crayola. It was like the 64 pack. Like you had to get those specific colors.
Yes.
So
I definitely see it. Yeah.
yeah, of course, New England held on to their original logo longer than any other of the original 10 MLS clubs. Of course, we were originally San Jose Clash, so that changed up to San Jose Earthquakes. You probably still remember that day when New England finally joined the rebrand train.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see New England join it was a very interesting time. So flashback to 2021, if I'm remembering correctly. They did it at the end of their Supporters Shield winning campaign. They played, of course, Inter Miami, and they lost that game. It would have been great to win that game, but they did not, and they ended up bowing out in the playoffs. So there was, for a long time, and I would dare say there still is, a little bit of bad juju associated with the rebrand. But I was the biggest crayon flag defender, and I will remain the biggest crayon flag defender. The new logo's nice. It looks good on merchandise and what have you. But having that old logo and being kind of that last holdout, like you said, it was a point of pride. I still miss the days of the crayon flag. I'm begging for, I know the NHL has reverse retros. We've seen the retro gear last year. I'm hoping that we can get some crayon flag retro gear to come out for the refs.
I will say I do prefer the new logo. I think it's really cool looking, just overall. But I do have nostalgia for the Lee Wen, I believe his name is, his what was it, silver FIFA card back in the day. It's just a better card than it had any right to be. That was a very nostalgic time in my development in soccer.
And for any Earthquake fans out there, I just would ask you to look up. It's the late '90s. I think it's '98 or around '99. Revolution jersey. More on the Stars and Stripes side of things. Alexi Lawless wore it. Just absolute beauty of a jersey.
I'll be right back. I have a picture of that, actually.
Oh, sweet. All right, so in the meantime, we're talking about that. One of the players that definitely wore that Crayola flag very often, one of the only holdouts I think left from the MLS Cup days, because Andrew Farrell, he's been at the club for so long, and he is one of the few players that survived that massive turnover. Of course, you still have Carlos Hill, the likes of Polster, and you can even include now 17-year-old Peyton Miller as some of the key players from 2024 that are still in the mix in this club. So I think we talked, Abram and I, about how Espinoza is having a bit more fun out there because he's not having to do everything himself. Is that fair to say similar about Carlos Hill?
I would say probably not. I would say he might be a little bit envious of Christian Espinoza and the fact that he very much still has to do it all by himself. You look at his goal scoring tally, and just overall how the Revolution have kind of been able to turn things around. It's a lot attributed to Carlos Heel. I mean, they broke the record for longest start of a season without a team scoring a goal, of their own merit. There was an own goal against NYCFC. But a lot of it has come down to Carlos Heel simply just making magic in the midfield, converting on penalties and free kicks, just really all his skill. So he's been one of those, again, ever since he's come to New England Revolution, he's been the main guy. He's been the heartbeat and heart and soul of this team. And, he's gone down. And even today, even before his career comes to an end, Taylor Twellman says it. So I know he won't be offended that I say it. He is the best New England Revolution player of all time. And hopefully one day when the Revolution get their own stadium, there'll be a nice Carlos Heel statue outside of it.
Yeah, he's definitely someone that if you are paying attention weekly to the MLS fantasy game, that you're always considering Carlos Hill as not just a roster option, but a captaincy option. And I do feel like as this team is progressing, that burden may ease up just a little bit. Of course, he's currently got 6 goals on the season. Leonardo Campagna is the only one that has multiple goals beyond that. But I think because you have some fresh players like Yusuf and Ganago that are still getting used to the league and used to this team, I think that narrative will hopefully change soon.
Yeah, Alhassan Yusuf was able to get a goal in the crazy game against Orlando. And, he's someone he kind of came in the middle of last season. So compared to a guy like Ganago, he has a little bit more experience. Ganago, very interesting player, great overall guy to talk to. Really enjoyed getting to chat with him in the locker room and what have you. But he's just a very streaky player. You can see his skill, but especially, there is kind of some deals, intricacies. I just made up that word, but essentially, he had a 6-month loan. It is essentially about to expire, but because he's played in 60% of the matches, essentially 100% of the matches, that loan's going to get extended out to a year. But there also is a purchase clause which would make him a DP. And the Revolution, they currently are utilizing the 2 DP for a U22 initiative model. And when you look at a guy like Ganago, he seems like a good TAM player, but to commit to a third DP spot for him would seem like a very big overpay. So unless he starts to turn things around, I would imagine that once the end of this season comes around, he's probably headed back to France. So, but again, hopefully, like you mentioned, as we get into the latter half of the season, he's able to really get a rhythm and start to build out, his performances and hopefully be a more impactful player.
Yep. And we've got some impactful coaches on both sides here. And one of the ways I feel like Bruce Arena has changed things for the better with San Jose Earthquakes is that he's not afraid to test the young players. And also, he's not afraid to bench players that you feel like are making mistakes and need a little bit of time to sit out and then regroup. And I've seen the young player trend, of course, with Bo LaRue getting a start the first game of the season. He's never looked back. And then also with the throwing Floriani out there, giving Rodriguez a couple games off. And then as Floriani, he had his moments, but he struggled a little bit as most rookies do. Rodriguez was able to get back into the fold. Abram, what are some other ways you've seen Bruce Arena change things in this Quake side?
There's many ways. I do want to real quick show Sam my picture. I paid money for this, so I got to show it off when I can. It might not be the one you're referring to. I have
that's exactly the one I'm referring to.
I have the Wijnaldum signature, which is why I'm so proud of this piece I have. But the hair is ridiculous, man. That's crazy. But yeah, no. Back to Bruce Arena. Back to the show. Sorry to interrupt, guys. No, I think that he's not just changed the quality that we have on the pitch, which is a huge, contributing factor to our new game success. I think just the mentality of the club, Christian Espinosa has mentioned it, like they just feel confident. They feel like they're going to go out there and they have just as good of a chance at winning as the other team. It doesn't really matter who it's against. And we have lost games this season. I'm not going to say that we haven't been swamped, but I feel like we go into most games with at least like a passion and like I said, confidence that I feel like was not there before. We went to most matches. It didn't matter who it was. Like, Ivan, you and I had to talk the whole season. We have to make episode after episode, just being like, probably gonna lose again. I don't know what we're gonna do about it. But now it's like the Quakes have a chance. It doesn't matter who against, we have a chance. And just from a fan standpoint, that's all I want to be able to say about my team because I haven't always been able to say that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that Bruce is playing the kids because obviously I'll give credit to Noel Buck. Bruce is someone who really put trust in him, and then when Caleb Porter came in, he kind of resided back to a more bench role, and it's a main reason that he ended up getting traded. But there's definitely, you think of a guy like Jack Peniotu, wasn't necessarily someone who got minutes. Peyton Miller, I believe, primarily got his run of starts with Caleb Porter. And then also, too, it did seem like he did have kind of that trigger to be like, all right, this guy's making too many mistakes, put him on the bench. But, there was a point where he was trotting out Josie Altidore. He was trotting out Omar Gonzalez. And, there was the saying, oh, Bruce has his guys. So it is kind of interesting to hear that. But definitely it's good to hear that he's giving some of the young guys out in San Jose a chance.
Yeah, I feel like he is less hesitant to do so, at least in San Jose, than some of our past coaches were, where there'd be more of a filling out period. And I guess maybe I think a little bit rose tinted back to the 2002 World Cup run where he was like, okay, Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley, I know you're both 20 years old, but you're going to start and you're going to be some of our best players in this run. But yeah, he did have some of those points as well where he has those veterans, especially if he's worked with them, his men's national team, that he may default to that. And there's not really that kind of presence in this San Jose Earthquakes. I mean, it used to be Jackson Yueill, but he left before Bruce Arena came here, and Jackson Yueill wasn't really a central figure of U.S. men's national team. But it's good to see that Caleb Porter has kind of done that for the Revolution. And Caleb Porter's story is always a fascinating one. He played a little bit for San Jose Clash in the late 90s before knee injuries ended his career prematurely. And then from 2012 to 2014, he went from an NCAA coach to all of a sudden he's coaching the MLS All-Star team against Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich. So Bruce Arena's coaching tenure has defined most of MLS. Caleb Porter has been one of the forefront figures in coaching of the 2010s and onward. So third season under Caleb Porter in New England Revolution. A bit of a different job this season compared to last campaign where 31 points, a really difficult season, still 10 points more than the Quakes, so at least you had that. But what do you make of Caleb Porter's impact?
Yeah, I think, it definitely was looking rough, to be quite frankly. It looked like he was on the precipice of getting fired and being one of those first coaches let go this season. But the change to a 3-5-2 or just, however you want to define it, has really done this team well. And also the fact that you have seen him start to form this team into something that is of his own. So you're starting to see the pieces come together. You're starting to get the results. A lot of it was talking about mentality and talking about guys, giving it their all and what have you. And, it was interesting to see, Dave Romney at the end of the season get an extension and then end up getting traded because it just, quite frankly, didn't seem like he was the biggest Dave Romney fan. So it has been interesting to see him kind of develop. I think he's on a great pace, and I think he does deserve a lot of credit for turning things around. And I think even just cultivating that locker room environment where you have guys bought in, even though you started the season so poorly, I think he does deserve some credit. I think it comes down to, these results are great, but if the Revolution miss the playoffs again, I think he has to be let go. And I think, you should expect hopefully a nice run in the playoffs. But again, he was on the precipice of getting fired, so the fact that this Revolution team has turned their season around, I think Caleb Porter does deserve some credit for switching his tactics, switching the formation, and maybe switching how he would like his team to play to switching to a system that really brings out some of the best in his team and has allowed his team to start picking up wins.
Yeah, and it has been a really great run of form since losing their first match in April. It was in Cincinnati, so in a vacuum, you'd be okay with it, I guess, but it was because how the season started, probably some nervousness there. But then all of a sudden, they beat Atlanta 1-0 on the road. They take care of business against New York City at home. They beat Charlotte 1-0 on the road, and Abram, we know how tough Charlotte can be on the road. And then Toronto 2-0. And then you also managed to beat Rhode Island in the U.S. Open Cup. So throughout that run, what are some of the things that maybe changed with how New England Revolution were executing and playing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to part of it. You look back at that Orlando game. If you look back to 2024, I think that game probably ends 3-0 Orlando. But I think this team does have the ability to claw back and the ability to maybe turn what should be a loss into a draw and, turn some draws into wins. So again, I think partially that's, down to some players, but I think Caleb Porter does deserve some credit for that. And I think they have the goal scoring ability and they have a quality back line. Last season they didn't have the best back line and they didn't have any goal scoring. So I think the fact that you have Alejo Campana, Carlos Gil scoring goals, I think that's crucial. You know that if you need to find a goal or two, you're going to be able to. And when you're leaking goals and not necessarily able to find the back of the net, that's going to really ruin the results that you're able to get. And I think, again, Mamadou Fofana, Brian Ceballos, I also didn't mention Eli Feingold, who is now pretty much their out-and-out starting right back, replacing Brandon Bai. The entire back line has done a great job, along with Alija Zivicic, who's had a great campaign as a goalkeeper. Caleb Porter, like say he's the best goalkeeper in MLS. I don't know if I would say that, but he definitely is, maybe a top goalkeeper in MLS, top 5, top 10. I would probably say top 10. But, I really think overall it's that more of complete performances compared to, having 5-4 games where it's just you're able to score goals or, eking out a 1-0 win just because you have a goalkeeper standing on their head. I think really they're able to play more complete. They're able to trust that they'll get the goal scoring. And I would say the main thing is throughout the entire season, even when they were losing games, their back line has been pretty tough to break down.
Yeah, I did notice that there was plenty of clean sheets in that run, and that absolutely played a factor in winning those games. And sometimes when you're struggling, you have to go back to basics. You start at the foundation, and if you can be tight at the back, then at the very least you're looking at a 0-0 draw, and then you hope that the offensive players do their part. And I think that was a problem for the San Jose Earthquakes when we were struggling. Part of that was also Daniel was injured, and Earl Edwards Jr., great backup, but the drop-off between him and Daniel, it was severely stated in those games. But then, after getting overrun a little bit in the Columbus Crew game, I think Bruce Arena was able to tweak things. He put some players in and out of the back line. Rodriguez would be reintroduced in this recent game against the Colorado Rapids as a starter. And then we beat Portland in a typical Quakes fashion. Like, we scored in bunches in that game. We still conceded a late goal, which was a little frustrating. But then we found a way to control the game a bit more in both Sacramento and the U.S. Open Cup, and then taking on Colorado Rapids. Abram, what are some of the things that you feel like the Quakes have been doing better in these last 3 games?
I think that the minute that we made it a 3-4-3, that formation has suited us a lot more. I think that Espinosa has done a remarkable job of continuing to be consistent as a goal threat, making things happen as a wingback. But he's a lot more effective, obviously, as a winger. That simple math. When Espinosa, a forward, is playing forward, he does forward things, and I think DeJuan Jones, is just really helping highlight how much we missed Espinosa in a higher up position, and also he's getting involved himself. He's kind of doing Espinosa's job, so it's kind of like 2 Espinosas on the right hand side. Obviously, that's a huge exaggeration, but you know what I mean. Like 2 very potent threats on each flank is much better than just one. I think that I think there's a lot of merit to the 3-5-2. I like that formation, especially when Hernan's available again. It's hard to say, that he shouldn't play because we want to keep this, 3-4-3 because the front line is going to drastically change when you have a number 10 in it. But another thing I think that has been, revolutionary. I didn't mean to make this, but Bo LaRue has just he's been astronomical from where I thought he was gonna be. I watched him all season last season with the town. I did not see this coming. I thought he was like, okay, good player. Most draft picks we get solid with the town, solid in MLS Next Pro. Riley Lynch was lighting it up with goals, but he didn't get a look. And I was like, okay, you would think that with somebody performing to a similar caliber at MLS Next Pro level, that Bo wouldn't get the time of day, especially when you have Cruz Medina, getting looked at in a similar position. Also, if you're looking for more of a defensive presence, we have Edwin Mendoza, who's been like looked at by European clubs. So, when you look at the two homegrowns that we already have signed to first team contracts, you wouldn't pick the third player in that midfield, which is Bo LaRue, who has just been a maestro for us. From the start, like he got an assist in his first MLS appearance. So he just continued to grow. Like it's not just like, oh, he's been good, he's been consistent. He's been good, and then he's only gotten better. And so that sight from Bruce in the short time he had with him in the preseason to see what Bo LaRue can offer to us, and then give him the tools to expand on that. It's just been a very key component to the team's success because he just like he does everything for us, Bo LaRue.
Yeah, I think with this Colorado Rapids game that just passed, we denied their win condition. I think with Colorado, they like to keep games tight late into games, and then they could perform well in the second half. The second half is where the Rapids won it in PayPal Park in the earlier fixture between these two teams. But also, I'm a little bit confused as to some of Chris Armas's lineup decisions. I'm not watching them week to week, but seeing the likes of Sam Vines, Bassett, and Cabral on the bench, and I look at their front six, their midfield, and their forward, I see where the goals are going to be served from. Mihailovic, of course, but are Yapi and Navarro really that far ahead from Cabral? I wasn't quite as worried. I was just worried about, was Zach Steffen going to pull off another blinder? Was the partnership of Maxo and Awaziem going to cause problems for our front line? But instead, Earthquakes were aggressive from the get-go. Dewan Jones, once again, his fingerprints on this match. And then the second goal was scrappy as hell, but it went in, and Arango is finding ways to score. He's not as free scoring as we saw for Real Salt Lake and LAFC at times, but he's still being very productive. So it was a match where everything came together well, and best case scenario happened for both of our clubs. Full rotations in the midweek in U.S. Open Cup. We exercised some demons, taking out Sacramento Republic, our local rivals, and you were able to take care of business against Rhode Island as well. Of course, both Sacramento and Rhode Island have their respective USL rivalries now. Oakland Roots is in the picture for us, and Hartford and Rhode Island. But with the U.S. Open Cup game, before we talk a little bit about the resilience and display in Orlando, were some of the bench or depth players that you thought made a good impression, Sam?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to why the Revolution ended up winning the game, and it was Caleb Porter. Basically, he mentioned how he came out with the starting 11. There was a completely different starting 11 that was training for that Orlando game, and he very much wanted to use this game to develop young players, primarily playing on Revs 2 as well as utilize some guys who are on the bench who aren't necessarily getting a lot of playing time in MLS match play, but I think it comes down to, like I said, the guys who played a major part in the eventual game-winning goal, and that's Christian Oliveira and Javork Diarbian. I don't know if Javork or even Christian will be available for this game. Christian was available for the game in Orlando, and that's because Thomas Troncolai actually got hurt during that U.S. Open Cup game, so it'll be interesting to monitor his status. But you have Javork Diarbian. He's just a speedy winger. He's someone who kind of has grown throughout the Revs Academy, played with Vermont Green in USL League Two, and also went to school in Providence. So a New England kid who's really shown that he has the pace and kind of has the goal scoring ability. I think it just comes down to kind of refining that ability and essentially just was able to play a cross in the box. He will probably say it was a cross, but it seemed like he might have been going for a shot because it rattled off the post and it followed to Christian Oliveira. And I mean, he's a guy who had just recently scored his first, I believe, professional goal, but definitely first goal of Revolution 2. And he just calmly put it away. He had pretty much, as open as a non-open that you can get. Jackson Lee, the Rhode Island goalkeeper, kind of got caught off guard by the ball, and essentially, he was able to calmly put it home. And I think during that game, when you're having two young guys come on with the expectation that they need to find the goal, the fact that they were able to is very impressive. So it's an interesting spot because I don't necessarily see them getting a ton of playing time this season. But there's definitely still that pipeline. You've seen a guy like Esmir Bartarovic, Noel Buck, it kind of fluttered out, maybe flamed out a little bit. But this Revolution side, as of late, has been able to turn guys into European talent. And a guy like Peyton Miller, seems like he could be that next guy in waiting. So it'll be interesting to see just how Christian Oliveira and Javor Diarbian kind of develop their game and continue to grow with the second team. And who knows, maybe the latter half of this season or looking to 2026, we could start seeing them more on the first team.
Yeah, when I watch Peyton Miller, I see some flashes of Caleb Wiley, who is not that much older than him and still very young in soccer terms. And now he's in Europe, and that's going to be, a nice prospect to continue to look at Peyton Miller. At the very least, if he's getting all this playing time at his age, will warrant some more U.S. men's national team looks. I'm sure he's going to be, hot commodity for whatever youth team wants him, but I think senior team maybe in the near future. I think one of the biggest storylines in that game against Sacramento, Abram, was Amal Pellegrino. He started off strong in that game, but if he was able to finish those chances, Sacramento would have been run back up the Interstate 80.
Sam, did you get to see this game?
I did not, and I'm not gonna lie. I was probably more rooting for Sacramento because I'm a big Ryan Spalding fan. So
that's totally fine. Don't watch it. So I think I'm not even exaggerating. 6 in the box 1v1 opportunities for Amal Pellegrino.
I mean, that sounds like Giacomo Vrioni for the Revolution. So I feel for you, man.
It was amazing. It was like. Their keeper is solid, but it wasn't the keeper. It was Amal Pellegrino just finding ways, just new creative ways to get the other team a goal kick. It was just, I couldn't believe it. I genuinely, Evan, when you mentioned that, I was just transported back to my seat, just watching it. It was like Groundhog Day, over and over, and he's getting 1v1 chances on his favorite foot. Like inside the 6-yard box, still find his way into the stands. And it was ridiculous. It got to a point where the Ultras, they had to start chanting his name so that he wouldn't walk off the freaking pitch. Like they were like, they're trying to keep him like motivated. And he was very thankful. Obviously, he knows he's not the kind of player that's like, I didn't do anything wrong. He knew that he had messed up. He, after the chant and everything after the match, he went over to the Ultras. He apologized to them and gave him his shirt, which was a very cool gesture. They only can give away a few of those a season, so that's very nice of him. I don't hate him as a person. I don't hate him as a player either. I think that he has a lot of quality and things about him that make him worth having here. But wow, that's the performance that I will never, ever be able to forget as much as I will try to.
Yeah, and I think what adds to the nervousness is because Sacramento Republic has beaten us a couple times. And we've also been knocked out once by Monterey Bay. Ironically, the USL team that I'm closest to in my heart, Oakland Roots, is the only team that hasn't knocked out the San Jose Earthquakes. So, of course, that tracks for my luck. But just thinking that, oh crap, if Sacramento find a way back into this game, Pellegrino is going to be burying his head in the jersey that he eventually gave away. But it all worked out in the end. But Yeah, these U.S. Open Cup games, a lot of people look at the box score and see 15 out of 16 MLS teams advanced. It doesn't mean it was easy. I mean, there was penalties involved between Philadelphia Union and Indy 11, but also just incredible to see the growth in soccer, and especially New England now. Four of the six New England states had teams in the U.S. Open Cup. So there was Rhode Island, Hartford, New England, and Portland Hearts of Pine. They have incredible jerseys, Sam.
I love the Portland Hearts of Pine. I got to go up for their home opener in Portland, league home opener. Great atmosphere. Got to talk with Bobby Murphy and Masashi Wada. Great people to talk to. Very excited to see that. And you mentioned we could have had New Hampshire represented in the Open Cup, but I believe Seacoast United, the champions of USL League Two, did not participate. Declined to participate in the U.S. Open Cup, and Vermont Green did not perform well enough to garner invitations, so we were left out of Vermont as well. But hopefully, whether it be Vermont, New Hampshire, if we could somehow get all six states, that would be absolutely amazing. But if we can get the Vermont Green back in there, I'll be a happy guy.
Yeah, I guess the equivalent from a California perspective would be we need Sacramento, we need at least three Bay Area teams. So Oakland Roots, San Jose Earthquakes, and El Farolito, the Burrito Boys. We need some sort of Central Valley representation, coastal, so Monterey Bay, and then we got LA, Orange County, and San Diego. That would be essentially our New England transformer on the West Coast. If you ever get a chance to drive from Sacramento to San Diego or something like that, you'll see just how big California is.
I see it on the map plenty. I definitely do not. I mean, hey, New England's got the smallest state in Rhode Island, so I can only, listing out all those teams, just imagining if there was somehow that many, semi and professional teams in New England, and imagining having to get them all in the U.S. Open Cup, I could not imagine it. So if there's somehow the Cali special, that would be amazing.
Yeah, my uncle's wife is from Chicago, but she has family from Boston, so she's flown out and done the drives from Boston down to New York, passing by states every few hours, so it is really fun. So, looking at the team that had that heroic comeback to get a 3-3 draw against Orlando, of course, Martin Ojeda shot for that hat trick, assisted by that penalty. But the goals came from Yusuf in the 38th minute with Feingold providing the assist, Polster in the 44th minute with Yueill providing the assist, and then Yueill scored in the penalty spot 85th minute. So the lineup of Ivasic, Ceballos, Fofana, and Beason, that back three, Feingold, Polster, Yueill, Yusuf, and then Miller as well, and then the front two of Ganago and Campagna. We did see some offensive substitutions in the 75th minute. Omsberg, I think, as a set-piece threat, and then Diaz for Beason to get into a more offensive formation. And then after Yueill provided that equalizer, then you brought in the likes of Sands, Bai, and Hughes to batten down the hatches. But would you say that starting 11 that started for Orlando, barring maybe a Chancalay injury, would be the 11 you'd expect to start for San Jose?
Yeah, I would probably say that the only change I would imagine is someone like Ganago for Chancalay if Chancalay is healthy. I mean, maybe we throw in Jackson Yueill just for the lovely banter and for that revenge match, if you will. But I think Polster and Yusuf are the outright starters, and I think when healthy, I would say Chancalay should start over Ganago. If that happens, I do not know. But pretty much that's been the lineup throughout this winning streak that the Revolution have had, unbeaten streak that they've gone out, and I would be surprised if that changes. We've definitely, when having everyone that he likes available, Caleb Porter does kind of stick to the script, if you will. So as long as Chancalay continues to be healthy, I think he's going to replace a guy like Ganago. But I do think Ganago is a very serviceable, second option up top. I think he's done better when playing more up top compared to being asked to be a winger. So I'd imagine pretty much the same exact lineup. God forbid any injuries pop up, but it'll be interesting to see how it lines up compared to San Jose.
Yeah, so I'll throw a key matchup your way, Sam, and then Abram, I'll give you one to give your thoughts on. I think a little bit of a reunion between Ian Harkes and Matt Polster in that midfield is going to be very interesting because, of course, they played alongside each other, they know each other well. I think midfield has been a pretty interesting spot for the Earthquakes because of the emergence of Harkes hitting the ground running, LaRue, and having to figure things out while Hernan Lopez is working his way back to 100%. How you see the midfield battle unfolding were some keys for New England.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be key. I think, Ian Harch is a guy that I really wish the Revolution, held on to. Frankly, I would love to have seen Ian Harch just lined up next to Alassane Youssef. I think the reason that he ended up getting let go and, Matt Polster continues to be the guy is, Matt Polster's probably maybe more of your traditional, like, mid 2010s kind of MLS kind of 6 or 8 in the sense that he's gonna probably pick up a yellow card like every single game. He's going to have those crunching tackles. I think he does have some maybe underrated passing ability, but he's really beat there to kind of be an enforcer, be physical, and kind of batter opponents. When you look at a guy like Alassane Youssef, he's someone who has great offensive ability, amazing passing ability, great vision, and he was able to make an impact in that Orlando game and in recent matches just with his passing ability. And Matt Polster and Alsan Yusuf, those probably I would be shocked if they both score again against San Jose. But I do think they play a key role in thinking of a guy like Matt Polster going up against Ian Hartz. It'll be interesting to see how he contains essentially again someone he's played with, but I think he's a much different midfielder than Matt Polster is, and I think Ian Hartz has lots of talent, and it'll be interesting to see how he combines, in this matchup, getting guys like, maybe Joseph Martinez or Chico Arango or Christian Espinosa involved, because, those are going to be key guys for the Revolution to stop. But I do think a key point is that midfield, if Matt Polster's able to make that defensive effort, maybe able to beat and batter, a guy like Ian Hartz, the Revolution, could have the advantage there. But it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup.
And Abram, which of the center backs do you have the most faith in to try to deal with Carlos Hill?
Well, I would. My answer would be Wilson. Wilson is probably the best center back we have defensively. Some days it's Rodriguez, but I think overall it's Wilson. But obviously he's not available. So I Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he'll like to drift to the right more and cut in on his left foot rather than the other way around. And so Rodriguez is going to be on the right side because Romney is on our left. So it's difficult to be like, okay, Rodriguez, go over there, go get him. That's who I would pick if I was to pick somebody to stick on Hill. It would be Rodriguez because he's just so mobile, so strong and difficult to beat. But it's gonna have to be Romney. I think Romney. I've had choice words to say on him, but he is consistent. He is experienced in this league, and those things are undeniable. I think I've had to kind of swallow that. Like I'm not gonna see, 10 out of 10 performances from Romney, but I'm gonna see 8, 7.5. Like he's gonna be fine. He's gonna do his job and he's gonna do his best. And bar some mistakes that he's made, he has made some mistakes. I think that he'll do all the things right, and I don't expect to see him making Hill's life easy by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that Hill is someone who is going to be a tough ask of any defender in this league to silence. It's going to be hard for anyone. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like you said too. He's a guy who, I think Orlando kind of talked about it post game where he's a guy who kind of can drift, go wherever he wants on the field, and so that essentially causes one of your center backs or one of your defenders to have to drift out with him, and that can kind of open up some spaces. So it'll be interesting to see how San Jose kind of deals with that, and just overall, it'll don't want to sound like too much of a homer, but I do think maybe Carlos Hill can take a little bit of an advantage of those opportunities. But definitely, if I was looking at from San Jose side of things, if you can stop Carlos Heel, if you can beat and batter him, I mean, I can't count how many times I would hear both Bruce Arena and Caleb Porter talk about how Carlos Heel is getting beaten and battered, and for a guy like Bruce Arena, who knows about that, I would imagine they're going to be very physical with Carlos Heel and try and get him out of his game.
For my tectonic take, I think that Ivashich and Daniel will have a minimum of 6 quality saves between them. Is that fair?
I mean, I would say that they're going to get plenty of shots. Looking at this game, again, the Revolution's back line has been well, but I do think this is going to be a very, probably a high scoring game and probably a very open back and forth game, whether it just be because of the two teams or I just think that this game is basically destined for chaos the moment it was put on the schedule. So I think, Ivachich is I think, it also depends on what you call high quality saves because he's a guy where he'll make like some absolutely amazing save, point blank, how on earth do you save it? But especially during set pieces, he can really get caught flat-footed. It's happened multiple times. This season, not as much, but definitely more in 2024. So I could definitely see the goalkeepers maybe pulling one out. And, when you have guys like Ganago, who it seems like they're able to put the ball almost in the net, whether it be off a post or just they aren't able to, hit it cleanly, it doesn't make the potential for some wild saves. But between maybe some backlines breaking down and just, offensive players trying to take advantage, I could definitely see some highlight reel saves being made.
Yeah, I think that the margin for error in this game is going to be pretty minor. And similarly, in the midweek game against Inter Miami, of course, we did hear that Luis Suarez is going to be out for that one. We'll see how many minutes Lionel Messi plays. But Inter Miami have done a good job assembling almost an army of South Americans that even if we don't recognize them from Barcelona, that they will find ways to fill in those gaps from the senior veterans there. And Inter Miami is going to have at least some neutral support from people who love Messi, who are Barcelona fans that show up San Jose. So that's going to be a difficult match. But in New England, in Foxborough, it's going to be a very interesting game as well with all this familiarity and these storylines. So we'll take an X factor that we think a unsung hero that we're hoping has a big game and that can swing the balance in our favor. For me and Abram, if you agree, you can agree with that player too, or you can come up with another one. I think it's Useni Buddha who is playing some of his best soccer these last few games. He's taken this opportunity with Josef Martinez and Hernan Lopez missing time to be a more integral part of the offense. And when he has been given extended runs with the team in his past few seasons, it would feel like everything was coming together at different times, and whenever he had shots on goal, it just wouldn't happen for him. But now that he's starting to have some goal contributions, his confidence level is going up, and I think that a lot of focus will be on Arango and Espinoza and Dewan Jones, who is playing in a different side than he's used to playing with either Columbus or New England. But Useni Buddha will have to capitalize, and when he gets those opportunities, hopefully he can finish one. Abram, your X factor?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a very good answer, Evan. I think that you're right. That Buddha has, looked a lot better with the opportunities he's been given as of late. I think he's really matured as a player. He's been given the time finally to make mistakes and then grow from those mistakes. Within games or within 2 matches. Sometimes he'll get a match and he didn't impress, and then he's gone from the lineup, loaned out to Monterey Bay, and then that's it from Buddha. But now it feels more like he is part of this team. He's part of the squad, and I like what he provides off the left. He's a quality winger for this league, and I'm happy to finally be saying that because it's taken some time for him to finally get to the spot. But to give a different answer from yours, I'm gonna go back to Bo LaRue and say that if he's having a good game, then it's gonna be really tough to deal with because he just has magic and he can he can pretty much do everything. He could do interceptions. He's great at dribbling. He's really impressed me with his dribbling. That's something that I didn't know he had. Before the season, I thought his dribbling was fine. He can move the ball like anyone can. But now it's like, wow, he can beat players and keep the ball in tight spaces. And then the passes and the shooting, we're starting to see he taking those shots, and once it unleashes, once he gets a clean strike with no deflections, you guys are gonna see just what he could do with when he strikes the ball. So my answer is gonna be Bolaru.
A great answer too. He's been one of the storylines of the season for me. No one expected him to be as involved as he has been. I think probably the way that we projected him was like, okay, maybe we'll see him on the bench and maybe he'll get some game time at some point. But no, he's definitely now someone that if he's missing in action for whatever reason, be it a youth national team call up maybe, then we're going to be scrambling to find someone that can fit that role. Because in that scenario, if we were to start Mark Anthony Kaye alongside Ian Harkes, their skill sets are a little less complementary in the sense that LaRue differentiates himself in that mix. So that's definitely something that he's been a blessing to have, even if he hasn't been a new signing. It almost feels like one because of how much new energy and diversity in that midfield skill set that he brings.
Big time.
So, what X factor are you looking for, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna come down to the wing play, and I think mainly looking at San Jose, looking if they go in that 3-4-3 where you have kind of Dewan. It's nice to see him back on more of his natural footed side. He's always that interesting left back who's I believe naturally, right footed. So I think if you're able to have a guy like Peyton Miller able to deal well, defending well, but also to getting involved in the attack. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he performs, especially because it'll be interesting to see how he performs given that he's essentially replaced DeJuan Jones. And there was definitely some, when DeJuan was traded, it was definitely a bit of a shock. And a lot of people, even myself, were like, why wouldn't you just stick with DeJuan Jones and have him kind of train up a guy like Peyton Miller? But I do think Peyton Miller has that kind of physical ability, kind of that grit to his game, if you will, along with kind of being able to get involved in the attack. So you have to give him a shout out. But I mean, really, it comes down to the wing play in general. When you look at Eli Feingold, he's again another winger who can also too be good in one-on-one situations, a quality defender. So I think when you look at the talent that San Jose has on the wings and on the flanks, I think it's going to come down to those wingers. I think particular probably Peyton Miller, but both wingers really have to have good performances if the Revolution want 3 points.
Yeah, wing play, especially when we think of Vitor Costa, who we haven't mentioned yet, and we're an hour into this podcast. He was probably the most mercurial of the Quakes performers in that game against Colorado Rapids. 1 minute he is pinging a cross from midfield and he's finding someone in the 18-yard box. Another minute he is making a rash decision in defensive cover. But Vitor Costa has definitely overall improved significantly from his first season despite those highs and lows. And this is still going to be a busy stretch for both these teams at the end of this. So both of them will be looking to win to keep their respective unbeaten streaks alive. And then for the Quakes, we have a quick rematch. We're going to host the Portland Timbers in the U.S. Open Cup, and they're going to be out for blood, out for revenge. We then host Houston Dynamo on May 24th. Dynamo having a difficult season so far. We have a Cali Classico midweek. Again, thanks MLS, not really for putting one of the biggest games in MLS history midweek. Yeah, I don't care if Inter Miami's midweek, but Cali Classico, come on, we have standards, damn it. And then St. Louis to close out the month. So, Abram, we've started out this month pretty positively. I think that this week, if we can come out unscathed and get a win between these two games, who knows, maybe 4 points, I think we're looking at San Jose Earthquakes starting to find their groove under Bruce Arena.
No, I would definitely say that. We've been trying to get this out of Bruce on how he feels about the team. But Ivan, you know how difficult it is to ask Bruce questions and get any sort of answer. We want to be like, how do you feel about the team? Are you confident? Like, well, it's game to game. Just how he is. Um, but since we can't get a definitive answer on from him on that front, I will answer. I think that yeah, we definitely look like a Bruce Arena team. He you'd hope so after he gutted the team and brought on all his old players in. Not a bad thing. It's worked out very well for us. Yeah, I think that it's finally looking like consistent. We definitely have an identity, which is huge in this kind of rebuild. So yeah, the rhythm has been found, and just we just gotta stay on beat.
Yeah, I think I have to think back to all the games that Bruce Arena has managed in his illustrious career. Does he ever allow himself to get excited? Like it could be the 4-1 win over Portland and be like, oh well, this or that could have happened, and it could be a different scoreline. Or go back to any of his MLS Cup wins with LA Galaxy. Yeah, credit to Houston Dynamo. Their fine effort. Yeah, Donovan, Keane, and Beckham make my life easier. Or heck, go further back to Dosa Serra. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, flattering scoreline for sure, but it was nice to be our regional
I
rivals.
have a I
And
have a tectonic take. I don't think Bruce Arena likes soccer. I think that he's just really good at coaching it, and it pays well, so he just sticks with it. But it doesn't seem like he's having a good time. He really enjoyed when Nick Lima was causing a ruckus at the end of the match against Colorado. I kind of think that he wants to be like, watch MMA. He just wants to go home and watch that all day. But and we're stopping him from that. We're just inconveniencing him. But either way, whether he wants to be here or not, I'm glad he's here.
yeah, Sam, currently the New England Revolution are ninth in the table. Obviously, you have taken that at the start of the season, right?
Oh, yeah. With how this team has started, I thought they were doomed to being at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So, kind of fighting for a playoff spot, definitely improved. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, guys. The nostalgia I just got from hearing, Bruce Arena still not answering questions, still having his. Oh my God, I just remember asking him about Giacomo Vrioni or asking him about literally whatever. Don't you dare take more than 10 seconds to ask your question. Don't you dare ask about formations. It's gonna be so great to see him again on Saturday. I know he can't wait to see me.
I'm already anticipating someone's gonna inevitably ask in media availability is, do you have any plan to stop Lionel Messi? And he'll give the who on planet Earth has a plan to stop Lionel Messi in his candor.
Yeah.
That's a great impression.
Oh man.
Yeah. I never knew if I could pull out Bruce Arena until just now.
Everyone has a Bruce Arena. Everyone's just like, oh, who cares? Formations,
By the
they're
end of
just a
the
starting
season,
point.
I'm still working on it. I don't want to do the New York accent. Where he's from, like Virginia area. I'm not quite sure. I have to work
Nah,
on that.
he's a New York guy, so
Yeah,
you can kind of do it's a variation of New York.
I'll work on it. We'll come back to this next time we play you guys, and I'll have a better one ready to go.
Nice.
Yeah, we love Bruce Arena. I think it's been a pleasure having him in the Sounds of Earthquakes and just having him throughout MLS, wherever he's coached, even on the other side of the rivalry, like Bruce Arena's made a tremendous impact. Taking it back to New England's season, the season that you were probably fearing would happen, Sam, is currently being experienced by the next three opponents that New England have. So you do have Chicago Fire in the U.S. Open Cup, but MLS-wise, Sporting Kansas City, DC, and Montreal. Even though a couple of those are away, I think that in order for New England to really set themselves up to really start to dream about the playoffs as much as you can in May, you have to at least beat two of those three and ideally 6 or 7 points haul, right?
Yeah, I think looking, DC really kind of seems to be struggling, even though they have been Tech A. And I think looking at Montreal, that's a team that, especially as of late, the Revolution have been able to deal well with. So I think they're probably going to perform well in the league. I think maybe the Open Cup that could be an interesting game, especially if Caleb Porter maintains kind of this thought of really playing Revs 2 guys and bench guys. I think that Greg Berhalter's side could take advantage of that. I was really looking forward to Greg Berhalter playing at Gillette Stadium, but they are not. They will be playing at the University of Providence, which is a lot farther from me than Gillette Stadium. So it will be interesting to see how that goes. It's only like, I think there's only like 2,000, 5,000 available seats in that stadium. It's a real small one, so it'll be interesting to see that atmosphere. But I do think there's a chance that, obviously Chicago's had their struggles, but they've also had some crazy good performances. So I think that could be a game, depending on how they line up, that they could get one over on the Revs. But I think that if the Revs do focus, all attention on the league, especially looking at some of those opponents, even, Sporting Kansas City, I think that they could, perform well, maybe looking at like, probably, 5 or 6 points, what have you. I do think there's that ability to maintain this momentum, especially in the league.
Yeah, I think it's still very tight, very early days in Major League Soccer, but you're starting to see things coalesce and figure out which teams are top, which teams are at the bottom. With the U.S. Open Cup, I feel like there's going to be less wholesale rotations in the sense that while the schedule is still very congested for everybody, if you rotate more than your other MLS level opponent, with the exception of Pittsburgh Riverhands versus Philadelphia Union, that is probably going to have a similar script. Hopefully, Pittsburgh Riverhands wins that one. But if you're the MLS team that rotates more than the other, then you're just biding time until you can sub in some of your big guns. So that's where things get really interesting with this U.S. Open Cup. And I think for teams like New England Revolution and San Jose Earthquakes, where we're hoping to get to the playoffs, but if we get there, we're not expecting to win the MLS Cup. This could be the tournament that we're looking forward to, and it is an incredible tournament. I'm glad that Major League Soccer is sending more teams this year than they have last year.
Yeah, definitely. And, also, too, it's, I would say probably for both teams, probably the best chance to win trophies, like you mentioned, but also, too, that CONCACAF Champions Cup spot as well. You really kind of have to invest in it because, again, I don't think this Revolution team's winning an MLS Cup. So their real chance at getting a trophy, getting a CONCACAF Champions Cup spot is in this tournament. But it really seems like Caleb Porter's taking the approach, and I think maybe after this upcoming match against Chicago, he takes it a little bit more seriously. But I would not be surprised if he continues to, feature some of the younger kids or feature a similar starting 11 to what we saw against Rhode Island.
Yeah, which means at least it's another start for Jackson Yueill.
Yes, exactly. So Jackson Yueill can tear it up down in Providence.
And that's the good thing about now having this connection from an East Coast team and the West Coast team is that they usually play in two different time slots, so they don't overlap as much either, so we can watch them both.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm very, the Apple deal, or just also too, being a former SB Nation blog, just kind of the dissipation of that really hurts your ability to follow the rest of the league. So I miss those nights, whether it be San Jose or Seattle, and kind of being able to get a heartbeat on that team. It's been a little bit more difficult, but it's hard not to keep an eye on the Earthquakes, especially with just how many former players they have on the roster.
My apocalyptic vision, if Messi does not play a single minute in the midweek game, is that we're in the heart of Silicon Valley. Google will crash by how many Quakes fans are Googling, why didn't Messi play?
Hey, man, I just hope that you guys beat him and you guys make jokes like Minnesota United did so David Beckham can get mad.
Yeah, I thought Vancouver won the Inter-Miami meme wars because Messi ducked Vancouver in the regular season and then they knocked him out of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But yeah, credit to Minnesota United there. But Abram, any final thoughts on this Eastern Conference showdown week with Inter-Miami and New England?
Yeah, I mean, I want to win both. Believe it or not, I also wanted to one of the memes that I saw that was funny was Miami called Pink Phony Club, which is just phenomenal roast there. But no, I mean, I think that we have good chance at either one. Suarez is a big loss for them. I think I heard Alba might not be playing for Miami. I can't say anything on that for sure. For the Revolution game, I have no idea what to expect. Yeah, I'd love to see Jackson play us again, but I I do hope you guys start Beason. That would make things a lot easier for us. Just gotta keep getting jabs in at Beason. But no, I think there's gonna be a fun match, and I'm excited to say that I think that we can get a result from either of those matches.
All right. Sam, any final thoughts on this matchup? And then after that, tell us where can we follow you and keep up with your work?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, I just want to say you guys are gonna get to experience the Tanner Beeson experience. I can probably almost guarantee that. So you got that going for you, but yeah, I think it's gonna be an interesting matchup again. It's almost to give you of what it's gonna be like in New England. You know, I imagine there will be a lot of support for Bruce Arena, and there will be a lot of support for DeJuan Jones, and it's I guarantee you there will probably be some subsection of Revs fans rooting for Bruce Arena and the San Jose Earthquakes. So it's going to be interesting. Again, it's going to be interesting to get back with him. You know, I intend on attending his post-game press conference and getting to chat with him. And I imagine he will be asked some amazing questions about how his time here ended. But, you know, it's just going to be so interesting and such a, it's almost like the game's like the backdrop where just kind of the returns are really the main show. So it's going to be a great match. I think it's going to be a high scoring one. I could really see both of these sides winning. So I think for casual or neutral, it'll be a great game to watch. But yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on. I would say just everybody go check out theblazingmusket.com. We cover soccer throughout all of New England, up and down the pyramid, if you will, from Vermont Green and USL League Two all the way up to the New England Revolution, and covering Boston Legacy FC, not Boss Nation FC, probably the worst name in women's soccer history. But it's great getting to cover soccer throughout New England. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm definitely not active there. You can follow me on Blue Sky. We have our Instagram, the Blazing Musket. But yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on, and definitely hope to be back on again.
Yeah, and Sam, you've been a great friend for me. I think it's now 5 years since we started working on like fan sided, and then we pursued all these different interests with Major League Soccer and soccer as a whole. So it's great to have this conversation and catch up as well. Abram, always a pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to covering these games a recap fashion in our next episode of the Tectonic Takes podcast. I know this one went a little bit long as we're approaching an hour 15, hour 15, hour 20. It's been so long that I'm forgetting the difference between a minute and an hour, so that's all for us. Best of luck to New England after this game, but go Quicks!
Go Quicks!